Hi, welcome to another video on Office 365. My name's Jeff Rhodes, and I'm the author of this new book, Creating Business Applications with Office 365, Techniques in SharePoint, Power Apps, Power BI, and more. So you can go to our site and see it. It's on Amazon right now for pre-order, and will soon be in other online and as well as physical bookstores. So please subscribe. I'm pumping out a lot of videos right now about this book and about Office 365. So I'd like you to join in for the ride. So let's get started. In this video, we're going to talk about how to work with InfoPath and send emails based on a separate SharePoint list. So there'll be quite a bit of SharePoint Designer and REST services, all kinds of fun stuff in here. And then we'll do something similar in Power Apps in the next video. So right now we're kind of paralleling the two to show how you can do one or the other. So I'm in Office 365. I'm going to go into SharePoint. And I already built part of what we need in this collaboration site. So let's go there. And you might remember this from a previous video. And I didn't actually make it show on the left, so let's go in first to our list. So we already did a list called accounting users, and what I did is I've got a user column and then phone number, which I repurposed the column, and then I had the send email notifications, and that's really what I want to cover today. But I'm going to add one more column, because what happens, particularly I work at the Air Force Academy, and we've got like different networks, and oftentimes the email that goes with your Office 365 account's not the email that the user wants to get it on. So there's some permutations there, but I'll add another single line of text column, and we'll just call it alternate email address, like that. And then what we can do there, let's just do a quick edit. I may put a different, so what normally I do in my logic is if I've got a different email that I want to send, I'll put it in there. So I may put my personal, like that. Otherwise we'll use the email that goes with the account. All right, so let's, we're going to use that, but let's jump over into InfoPath. For this example, I'm going to do a form library. And so what I'd like to do is just start in InfoPath, and I'm just going to do something really simple so we don't spend too much time. There we go. And we'll just say sample purchasing form. And on our other examples, we did a SharePoint list. I like the form library because I can have a little bit more power. And also we can do things like archive. We won't do it here, but I like to have like an archive button, and then it moves that whole thing to another form library so that we're not really only our active ones are in our main library. So we don't need all that for today, but we'll go that way. So let's insert, I'll just do something like that. And I'll just say, purchase info. If I can spell it right. And then we'll go over here and add our columns. So we'll say, let's add a group. First do purchase info, like that. Do as a group. And then inside here we'll do, maybe we'll, actually for the user, for the, people person, it's a little easier to do it this way. So I'll come in here and add it like that. And then I can move it, put it inside our purchase like that. And we'll rename that to purchaser. I'll just say user. How's that? And then this one goes like that. There we go. And then we can add more inside here. So let's just put like purchase date date. And I won't put the default value here because we can do it in the control later. So here we go. We'll put it. Oops, didn't quite do it how I want it. Let's try it again. There we go. And then I can come here, go to the properties. What I like, see, notice I got a function button here, so I can insert the function today. Today will just be a date. If we wanted the date and time, then we could use now instead. There we go. And now let's do item name. Do item description. And we'll do send to accounting. And what I'm doing here is I like to have a checkbox so that we can say when we're done. We may be filling out this form, but we're not ready to send it on. Then remember about workflows and everything we're going to do after is that they're run every time we save the form. So we got to really keep track of our state of where we are. So we're going to default that to false. So let's add in a few more rows here so we got plenty of room. All right, so we can do like item name, item description. Let's make that a multi-line. Move that down a little bit. Oops. Something like that. All right. Looks good. All right, and now what we want to do is go on and add a different section. So let's go and always put one with like a heading. Let's see, maybe like that. There we go. We'll just call it accounting. Now what we did in our last video is talked about how we can limit access to the accounting group. So I won't do that again, but it's very similar to what we do on this one. But I will go ahead and let's add a new group. Let's call it accounting. And we don't need these groups, but it just makes it a lot easier to kind of see what's going on. And we'll just add approved by accounting. Oops. True, false, default it to false, and we'll say accounting approved by, and we'll put that as text. All right, so we'll do that, and we'll do that. And we'll change this to a drop-down list. Excellent. All right, we don't need this guy right now, so we'll delete it. So what we're trying to do is basically when they check this box, then we'll go ahead and email the accounting department, tell them that they have something to approve. So, and we might as well put that stuff in that we're talking about. So one thing that we covered in our last video, if we want to use this list in InfoPath, then we need to change this display. So let's go ahead and just do that now. We'll go ahead and recreate that because it really doesn't make much sense if we don't run that. Let's see. Not getting my list little gear up here for some reason. Let me pause for a minute and see what's up with that. All right, well, I clicked up here and now I've got it. You might notice I'm using Internet Explorer, which I don't usually use, but there's going to be a good reason for that coming up. But that's one reason I'm getting a little bit of weirdness. So let's go into list settings. There we go. And we'll go into this user column, and what we need is to change the display. Instead of name with presence, we want to show account. And when we do that, you'll see we get this longer one. And that's what in InfoPath ends up being the username. All right, so let's go back to InfoPath. So we're going to do two data connections here. So we're going to add, we're going to receive data from a SharePoint list. You notice it doesn't know where we are, so we're going to just get the URL of the list. Put that in there, of the site, I should say. We're going to grab accounting users. So the first one we're going to use to display in the box. So what we want is the user, and we want the ID, and we're going to sort by the user. And we're going to check that box, automatically retrieve it, so that our drop-down box, if they are in the accounting office, will show right away. So we can take the default name, and that'll work. Now let's go do another one, and this is going to be to query whether they're in the accounting department or not. So we'll use that same URL, pick accounting users as well. Again, we need the user, but we don't care about changing the sort, because what we're going to do is just query to see if our user is in there or not. And so I don't need that. I don't need this one. It gave it a unique name. Instead, I'm going to call it query accounting users. Great. The other thing I like to do is I like to have a variables section. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in because we have our first variable. I'll put a group in. And I'll add is accounting user. So I'll set that on the way in, and then we'll use that variable. And so this will be a true false. Now one thing I like to do, and I already deleted that row, let's insert it again. While we're testing, I like to go ahead and show that. What I'll do is I'll change this to calculated control, just so it's clear that we're just using it. And then we want to make sure we get rid of that on the way in. So we'll get that in a second. Let's go ahead and set up our box. And we're going to get choices from, and notice it defaulted to our user. And then our value that we're going to store that back to SharePoint will default to our display name. Sometimes we'll want it to be the ID, but this is fine. So that will show us the list of users. And then we might as well do our rules while we're at it. So let's do let's go to our manage rules, and we'll say, okay, we're going to do a new formatting rule, and we're going to say disable if not accounting user, like that. And we'll do a thing. So we'll say if, let's reuse our variable, is accounting user, and you can say is equal to false or is not equal to true. So I'm just going to do the latter just in case it was null for whatever reason, which shouldn't happen. If it's not equal to true, then we're going to disable it. Okay, and we can copy that rule and we'll apply it to this one as well, because you don't want to be able to that in. So again, if the accounting user is not equal to true, or if it's equal to false, so they're not in accounting, then we disable our control. So what we need to do on the form load then is we need to figure out if our accounting user, we need to set that value. And as we talked about more in the other variable or in the other video, is we do that with data connections, and it takes three things. We have to set our query, run the query, and then read the result. Okay, so we'll set the value. So we'll set user value, and what we're going to do is set a field's value. So what we do is we change this and go to the query one and go to the query field. We set the user, and this is why that user needs to be in the format, the account format, because we're going to set it here, and our value is going to be the username function. So if we print that out, it looks exactly like how we did it in SharePoint. Okay, so we set that, and then the next rule, we're going to query accounting users, and our action's going to be query for data. And we just need to make sure we query the right one. And then our last one is set is accounting user. And I'm going to set a field's value again. In this case, it's our variable. And what we run is, now here we have to think about what we're going to do. So we're going to count our results. So we'll grab the count. So what we're basically saying, it's kind of like select star from table name where ID equals whatever, you know, on a SQL query. So we're going to get the result. So we queried it. We go to the data fields, and we're just seeing if any rows came back, and if there was a row, then that will be the count of them. So we're expecting that to be 0 if they're not an accounting user. If they are in the accounting list, then it should be 1. So we'll say if that's greater than 0, we'll set that they're an account. That'll be the setup of the accounting user. So again, there's a video that I talk about this in more detail. So let's go ahead. That's probably enough to go ahead and test with, and then we'll do the rest of it. So we've got a couple things we got to do. We've got to come in and publish. And we want to publish 2 things. So let's detail. So we'll just say purchasing form. Like that. I'll just put it where it goes. And then it's going to want the same site. We'll see if that's still in the, yeah, it's not in the clipboard anymore. So let's grab it again. So we can build the form library first, but I like for it to let InfoPath do it, and then we can put it in there. So we'll see, we come in, and we're going to enable it to be filled by a browser. Do a form library. We're going to create a new one. And I'll just call it purchasing forms, like that. And then what's nice, another thing I like about InfoPath is we can go in and we can pick some of these that I want to do. So I'm going to pick the column so that they show up, and we can put it in, you know, we can export that to Excel or whatever. So I'm going to add the purchaser. I'm going to add the purchase date. Notice it puts a space in for me. I'll put the item name. The only thing I really can't add is anything that's in repeating tables and so forth. And we're going to need this send to accounting, even though you might be tempted to get rid of it, but we'll see later that we need it. And then we might as well, you know, put these in as well. So we'll basically grab all our data, but what we don't need is our variable, so we won't do that. So we'll come in and publish. And that'll be enough for us to test, but won't be enough for us to actually save the form. So we'll come back and do more in a minute, but let's let that go in. And rather than open this form, that'll open it for me in Chrome. I want to actually do it in Internet Explorer. So if I can come in here, it should show up here. There we go. I guess I didn't click it the first time. There it is, purchasing forms. And I've also got a video on how to enable all this in Office 365. So notice that I've got a form. There we go. Give us our, got some sort of problem with the browse for whatever reason. It's got a, oh, I've got 2 purchase dates in there. I don't know how that happened. But it did drop down my list of people from my thing. So far so good. Notice though there's no save or close or anything. So I can close, but I can't actually save the form. So we got to deal with that. All right, so let's come back. Yeah, didn't notice that we had 2 purchase dates. You probably did. So we'll delete that row. We don't need that. Not sure why those graphics didn't come over, but not a big deal. Oh, and I didn't look, but this would have been true, and notice that those were enabled. So we were able to test the fact that since I'm in that list, that it read that I'm an accounting user. So that's good. So we can actually delete that one as well. All right, so what we need to do next is tell it where we're going to go. So we're going to publish our form to the library. So we come back in here, and this, it's a little inconsistent. This one, it wants the actual path to the library. And then the file name is actually a pretty big decision. We won't spend too much time on it here, but it's one of those that you have to work with, because you want to make sure that whenever they edit the same form over and over, they get the same name. But if they want to do another item, we don't inadvertently give them this, the same form. We want them to have a different form. So in this case, I'd be inclined to work with the item name, the user, and the date. Probably that combination is probably unique. So I'll usually use a concat function, and I'll put in the display name of the person. And you can put as many of these in as you want. So I'll just put a dash. Then I'll put in the item name. And kind of see the deal. Dash. And again, we need the date, because if we didn't, otherwise they buy the same thing, toner or something next month or a few months from now, it'll try to use the same name. So that will be the name that we'll use, and we'll allow to overwrite. That's what allows us to update the form and each person to come in and set their approval and so forth. And we can take the defaults there. So that will help us. And then the other thing we can do is come into form options. And what we want to get rid of these save as. And notice if we'd have gone in here before, that submit would have been disabled. But now that we've saved it to the library, we do that. It's enabled, but we don't want to save or save as. We just want to use the name that we gave it. So we'll save our overall form, and then we'll publish it again. All right, there it goes. So let's come back over here. Let's do a new form now. That's a lot better. See how we have a submit. Actually fixed our graphic somehow as well. So I'll click the button. Put myself in there. Get some family members as well, but I'll put myself. There we go. I'm not sure. Oh, I didn't put our item name in there. I think what I was trying to do. Yeah, so let's close that. Sorry. Not going to be able to test it very well. So that's kind of the life of development. We'll see things as we didn't do as we go along. There we go. That one back up. Otherwise, we never would have gotten that part of our form title to go because we have no way to put in an item name. All right. Let's try it again. And we'll just call it bookshelf. And we'll get to the send accounting later when we're ready to test. Let's just see if it did it. All right, now put our name in there. We could come in there. It's like it blocked a pop-up if I tried to do it. Let's try it again. There we go. So we can edit the form if we wanted to. All right. So we're ready for InfoPath now. So that put it in a new tab. So we'll come back in there. So one of the challenges that we're going to get is how do we know, we want to make sure we don't send to accounting every single time that we save the form. Like we may have gone in and put the name in and then we check the box and accounting approved it, but then we go back and edit it again, and now we don't want it to go get sent to accounting because many of the forms I've done, it's got like 6 different groups that it's got to go to, and we want to make sure each one only gets one group. So the way I've done that is I like to come in and add a column that's in the library but not in the form, and we use that to keep track of where we are. So you'll see we've got a send to accounting, and what I like to do is I'll add another column that matches. So I like to call it original. If I'd been thinking, I would have gotten rid of the spaces. That's what the InfoPath gave us, but that's okay. Very important that this is limited to no. And then I don't want to put it in the default view. So I'm basically using this as a global variable that we don't put in the view and nobody really knows is there, but we use it from SharePoint Designer. So if we come back, you'll see since we didn't put it in the view, we don't actually see it, but we do get the other parts that we put in there. All right, so let's go over to SharePoint Designer now. And I've got that opened, but I need to refresh it. Let's see if I can do it from here. Oh, there we go, refresh. I need to refresh somewhere. There we go. So we got our purchasing forms. And I'm going to make a workflow. Now this is already going to be reasonably long, so I don't want to go longer than I need to, but we'll just work with the SharePoint 2013 workflow. But what I found is the 2010s are nice, particularly for that sending email step. So sometimes if 2013 won't send to a non-SharePoint email, so you can do that part from a 2010 and then call that from 2013. But we won't worry about that in this video. So I'm going to say notify approvals. I won't say accounting because it may be other ones as well. All right, so it brought up our workflow, and as you might know, it's organized in stages. So we're going to first do is notify accounting. So I like to just, you can go up and do actions and stuff from the menu, but I usually like to just type them. So I'm going to say if, and what I'm looking for is from the list is I forget what it's called now. Oh yeah, if send to accounting equals yes. Okay, and if so, then what we do is we'll then want to check to see if our original one is no. So go to the O's. And I'll go ahead and just put in a comment here. Need to email. Accounting. Yeah, and I forgot something I want to do. So let's add a stage. Let's move that one up above. I'll move this one down. See if we can do that. Come on. Oh, there we go, move down. All right, so I like to say initial so this will be easier if we set up a variable first, and we're going to need a couple more variables anyway. So we'll say email accounting, and we'll set that as a Boolean, which is the same as a yes, no. Like that. And so we'll set, if I can type right, set a variable to no. And then we'll, in our transition, we'll say go. And we'll just go to the next one. And so after our comment, then we'll come in and we'll set our variable to yes. And then we can put, because we got to be a little careful here, we can only put one if in here. These transitions are a little bit squirrely. So we'll say if our variable is yes, and actually we need to create this stage first, so let's do that. Say email accounting, then we'll go to the email accounting stage. Otherwise, we'll go to the end of workflow. Didn't quite take. All right, so we made it to the good part. So now that we're here, we know that we want to build our workflow. I mean, we want to send an email, the right one. So let's go back and look at our list, and I want to show you how we're going to read the data out. So let's go back, and the reason I was in Internet Explorer in the first place was so that we could go and look at we can read the accounting info the way we want to. Okay, so let's go back to library settings. And let's go to, oops, actually I didn't want library settings, I want site contents. All right, we'll go to accounting users. And one thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to edit this view for a minute. You'll see why in a minute. Could be kind of nice here is to show the ID as well. So we'll change the ID and show it as number 1. Okay, so we got our 1 and our 2, and we're going to do, yeah, we got one of these is yes and one of them is no. So I'm going to build a new tab here. Make sure I have our URL. So what we're going to do is call a REST service. And REST stands for Representational State Transfer. So it's a way of communicating in the browser. And so you go to the list, and then it's got a special URL. So it's API/web/lists get by title. And then you have to put in single quotes the name. So counting users. Quotes that way, and then we say /items. Nice, and we get that. And by the way, if you don't get that, what you have to do is, and this is easiest in Internet Explorer, go to Internet Options, and then go to Content Settings, and then if you have that turn on feed reading view, then this won't work. So you want to turn that off. Okay, and what you basically have, is our different, our two lists. So we got to find them here. Let's see. Yeah, so here's our send email notification. One of them's false. And I got to find where the other one is. Should be 2 items. I'm actually only seeing, oh, there it was. I collapsed it. So you've got one here. So notice it's got that alternative email address, and then you've got the second list. So this is our 2 items. Now, one thing to note is that the user ID, what you end up with is just the number. So you can't really read like the user's info, but even though I did get that alternate email, you just get the number representing the user, but very importantly, we get the ID. So it turns out what we really just want is the ID. Okay, but more importantly, we can filter. So let me see if I can get this right, and then we're going to use this in inside of SharePoint Designer. So I can say filter. And then I want to say send email notifications equals 1. Let me copy that in case I messed it up, which I did. Let me look again, and let's go back. Oh, notice that there's no S. See if I look over here, send email notification. Let's try that. That's better. And so if you look, now I've now filtered it just to the one that had that to yes. So if I can do this from SharePoint Designer, then I can come back and read from the list, and you'll see how we do that in a minute. But that's basically what we're going to be doing. So I'm going to copy that into the clipboard, and we'll go back into Designer. Like I said, this is a little complicated. This is about as complicated as it gets inside of Designer, but it should be kind of fun if you want to try it. Okay, so what we're going to do is, first thing we're going to do is we're going to set, and I actually could probably do it right here. We want to set our list back, because now that we've done it, we want to go ahead and we're going to set that original send to accounting to yes, because otherwise we'll be in an infinite loop. So we've got that taken care of. All right, and then what we're going to do is, got my other machine so I can kind of see, we have to build a dictionary. And this is kind of a REST thing as well. So if you've done any REST, you'll see it. And so we want to call this accept. It's a type string. And we have to put a particular thing in here telling it's JSON data. JSON stands for a JavaScript object notation. So then you say OData equals verbose. Hopefully I won't make any typos on that. Okay. And then we have to tell it output, and what I want that to be called is request headers. So it gives us a dictionary like that. And then what we want to do is we want to call our web service. So we just start typing call here. And here, now we could put the whole URL in here. Like that. And put all that in there. But I'm not going to do that right now. So, because that hard codes us, you know, it's kind of nice if we move this or whatever so it still works. So what we can do is we can go to workflow context and get the current site URL. So then I'll paste the rest of it in. Basically, it's like that. And notice it's got the whole query on there. We'll leave the rest of this alone. Okay. Oh, and then importantly, we need to go to properties here. This is always kind of messes me up a little bit. So let's check it out here. So we need to put our request headers there. And we're going to need a new variable here, which we'll call JSON response. We need a new variable called response headers. And then we have the response code already, like that. There we go. And then, so we basically, if you think of it, it's kind of like we've read this, but this is XML data, and instead in the JSON, which is has this like D and then results in it, it'll kind of be like this kind of deal. So this video is pretty long already, so I won't try to show you some JSON, but take my word for it. So we're going to get, we just type this in. So it's D/results, like that. From, and this is our JSON response. And then we're going to put that to still another variable, member response. That's a dictionary as well. There we go. And then we're going to count. Because in my example, we just have one of those, but we could have, we could have 30 people in that list, and we need to go through there. So we're going to output, and we're going to use their variable. And then we got one more variable. And we're going to say index, which is a number. to 0. All right. So kind of a lot there. Now what we're going to do is, in the beauty of this whole thing is that now once we set this up, we can loop through and then email everybody. So I'm just going to loop. And I'm going to loop the number of times. Okay, and so we're going to iterate through accounting users. And this will run however many times we counted. So however many people we have in there. Oh, and I see something that's a little bit different. So let me change, go back to index here. Let's make that an integer instead. Just so it doesn't say 0.0 like that. There we go. So we're going to run that this time. And we need to get, it's a little bit complicated here, so we got to, so it's going to read the dictionary again. So we're going to get, I'm going to bring this open because we want to, the parentheses important. So we want to get a parentheses and then we want to put in our variable, which is index, like that. And then we want to read the ID. So again, keep bouncing around. We're effectively trying to get this line right there. And if we go back to, well, you might remember, I won't jump to it right now, but that was the row that we were on so that we can read the rest of the data. So we're going to get it from member response and we're going to put that in a new variable that we're going to call user ID. And we know that's an integer. All right, so what are we going to do with that? Well, we're going to have a couple new a couple variables. So we want to basically read their email and their name so that we can send the email right. So we'll say member email. That'll be a string. Now this one's a little bit complicated. Not that the rest of this hasn't been already, I know. Oops. Do it this way. So we're going to get we're going to change the data source away. We're going to read accounting users. And what we're going to read out of there is the user. And what we're going to read out of there is the email address. And then what we're going to look it up by, we're going to look up the ID, and then we're going to grab that variable, which is the user ID. So what that means is that we're going back to the list. We grab the ID we want, and then we're going to grab that, and we're going to look at it. So let's copy this action because we're going to do the very similar thing. We're going to do a new variable, and we're going to call it member name. It'll also be string. And we'll do the exact same thing, but we'll get the display name instead. Now notice, what I didn't do is deal with that alternative email address. Okay, so we could do that. What we basically would do is another if. So we'll say if and actually what we would do in this case, let's go back and change that a little bit. So we won't get the user, we'll just get the alternate email address in this case. So then we'll check it. If our variable is empty, scroll over a little bit, then what we'll do instead is we'll read this again. So let's copy this. So we'll go back to the user, get down there, and we'll go ahead and grab that email address. So either way, because that one always has to, because it's put in on the SharePoint side. All right, so we're almost done. So the last thing we do is we email. Now, all right, so we want to kind of forget where we find all these ones from the variable. Let's look. Oh, there we go. Then I do the current variable. And I do member email. That, and I can copy somewhere. See, and then I usually do something like purchase requested, and then we'll grab from. Remember how we went and wanted it? We needed that to get added from the form to our SharePoint library, and that's why, because now I have all this item name and so forth. If we didn't add them, we wouldn't be able to use them from here. So we'll do that as a thing, and we'll say dear, and then again we'll use our variables. Remember how we looked up the member name. And then we can say purchaser. I won't bore you with all the details, but there is a good one. Let me look up to make sure I have the exact right way to do it. Okay, so I'll do something like click here to approve or to review. We won't say necessarily. Now we need to go back to InfoPath. See if we can go back to our form. Oops. Site contents. And we need to click on a form, and we need to grab this whole URL. And then we'll parse it out correctly. So what we can do is make a hyperlink like that. And for the address, we'll paste all that in. And then this part, we've kind of how we did before, we can put in certain parts. So this will be the context, the site URL. And then the location, this part, all the way up through and this one doesn't look exactly like my example, but hopefully that's still work. So this will be our encoded absolute URL like that. And I'm not sure about the rest of this part, but we'll try it out here and see. But you get the basic idea. All right. Long time, but let's go ahead and see if we have any errors. And then if you had other steps, you basically would repeat this with each type of, you might have a legal list and a human resources list and all that. But let's put it to bed here. Let's check for errors. Oh yeah, I didn't go to the very end. I just said go to end of workflow. That's showing an error. Oh yeah, so sometimes what you have to do is you have to publish. Save. We'll save it. And then close the workflow and come back in, and then it'll show you your error. So let's make sure we can save it for now. That's a lot of work. I probably should have saved in between in case something went wrong. All right, let's close this workflow. Come back to its list. Oh, it's not showing up there. Let's see if it shows up over here. There it is. All right, we'll edit the workflow. Let's go down and look at that one. Looks like that error's gone away. Well, I'll just delete this. And we'll put it in again. Probably is related to changing the value of the type of variable after I had already put the line in. It probably just couldn't figure that out. Let's check for, there we go. Let's publish. Okay, we can close the workflow, and then what we need to do is go back here on the workflow and notice it's set for manually start. but you'll want that to, usually I just do both when it's created and when it's changed. And that way if they went in and checked everything all at once, it would work. So we can save. And then we'll go ahead and publish again. All right, now one thing I didn't do was put a bunch of log statements in there, which is what you can do if we have to debug. But let's go over and see if it's going to work. So I've got that. Let's close this. Just because we left it open for a while, we're not quite sure what its status is right now. So let's go ahead and edit this. Oh, that's interesting. Guess I didn't want to do it that way. Just click it that way instead. I don't want to open in the default. So really what I want to do is just check this box and submit, and then we'll go look at whether the workflow worked or not. So what we can do is we can go to workflow, and we can watch it. And this is where if we put some log statements in it, we could, it would tell us where it is, but it's completed now. So I'm going to pause the video and we'll see if I got an email, and if so, we'll bring it up. All right, well, good news, it seemed to work. I have the email up there, so you see it gave us our, the name that it did, the bookshelf. Notice that it sent it to my office one, so that the alternate email address, we will have to check on that to see if it read that in correctly. And then let's check the link. So it gave us something. I wasn't all that sure on how it was going to do it, so it's loading this up in Chrome. Ah, nice. So let me make it a little smaller so it fits on our screen here. And yeah, looks like it got us to that form. And I can do that. I could click it, submit it. So we got that. And then if we had another workflow to go to the next group, then that one would be enabled for those users and they could check it off. So I've used that quite a bit. Plenty long video, so I will sign off here. Don't forget to subscribe. We'll be doing a similar one with Power Apps, and then quite a bit on Power BI and other types of technologies. But for those of you still using InfoPath, I hope this is helpful. Have a great day.